everybody, I'm Chucky. This is Jason. We're at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook for the wild card edition of the Sports Betting Podcast Bookends. The regular season ended, Jay. It was kind of crazy the way some of those games ended. You had the Jags winning and getting into the postseason. You had the Green Bay Packers, who I'm not crying at all about, losing Detroit Lions, and they didn't get in, but it was kind of a wild Week 18. But we're really here to focus on Wild Card Weekend. But before we jump into this, we're going to talk a little bit about the College Football National Championship game. It was TCU, who, again, before the season started, was 500-1 against the preseason favorite, the Georgia Bulldogs. And we kind of had talked about TCU. Were they going to be able to handle Georgia in the trenches? They clearly couldn't. I don't think there was a handprint on Stetson Bennett the entire game. They were in the backfield against Max Duggan big time. Yet we were huge Georgia fans that night because we had a lot of TCU money, both plus the points and on the money line, as far as that goes.
Yeah, TCU over 70% of the tickets on plus the points, over 74% of the tickets on the money line were on TCU, and I think 72% of the tickets were on the over. So the over bettors did get there. Really, Georgia cashing an over ticket all by themselves without the help of TCU's 7 points. But we kind of made a little bit of a point to it that this was a bit of a mismatch. That it was a big underdog, David versus Goliath, and every once in a while those come in, but Georgia really kind of put it to bed early. Two great semifinal matchups that made us intrigued for that final matchup. But the game kind of ended early, and Georgia dominated. And Georgia's dominance and what they have returning with the young quarterback that you saw come in late in the game there, they open next year as the national championship favorite at 3-1. A really soft schedule
right? Yeah.
On their side of things from both a non-conference and on the side of that SEC bracket. A very open schedule for them. TCU opens up 40-1, losing a couple of their guys, but Will Howard, their quarterback, should be there. Some other intriguing ones. Colorado, obviously with the Deion Sanders move, 250-1 to win the national championship. Michigan, 12-1. We'll see if Harbaugh ends up being the coach there. And one of the teams that I'm looking out for that I think potentially can get back into national prominence is Florida State, who we've got at 18-1.
And you can never rule out Nick Saban and Alabama, of course.
Yeah, they're 9-2. They're the second favorite, right behind Georgia.
Especially seeing Georgia now being back-to-back champions in this kind of playoff era. I think you look at TCU, great season. Duggan did a phenomenal job after being benched early in the season. Sonny Dykes is going to have 35 to 40 new players coming in there, but they're kind of, once the conferences get kind of realigned, they're going to be the team in that conference, I think, moving forward. You're right about Deion. I mean, and Colorado, they open up against Arizona State, and then they play TCU next season, so I'm sure that's going to be kind of a must-watch game early next season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen early. There's some early matchups with a lot of these teams that, again, determine, especially that early seeding. But a loss early in the season isn't as bad as a loss late in the season like we saw with Ohio State this year, hoping having to backdoor their way into the playoff. And obviously USC and Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams also going to have an argument to be made as to they can get in this national championship. And again, we're not to the 12-team playoff. It's still going to be the 4-team playoff for this year. We won't get to the 12-team playoff till the 2025 season.
I mean, I was excited about the 12-team playoff, and I think it's great for our business to have that format. But after seeing what Georgia did to TCU, you have to wonder, those teams toward the end of it, how competitive they're going to be against some of these big schools. But we'll wait and see. I know Jay said we'll have to wait and see if Jim Harbaugh is coaching at Michigan. I'm going to say he is not. I'm going to go out on a limb right now and saying, as the Jim Harbaugh makes the jump back to pro football, and I'm going to make the Denver Broncos as the odds-on favorite for Jim Harbaugh next year. So that's our college segment, kind of recapped the national championship game. Now we're going to jump into Wild Card Weekend. There's a lot of question marks, especially at quarterback for some of the teams in the AFC. Got a bunch of teams that we didn't expect to be there this year that are there. But we're going to start with the early game on Saturday, and that's the Seahawks and 49ers. It's the third time that these two teams have met. 49ers are 2-0 in that game, in those games. Almost 80% of the tickets are on the 49ers. San Francisco is 5-0 against the number, their last 5 games at home. However, kind of an interesting trend with Seattle. Seattle has had some success against the 49ers. They've gone 15-4 straight up in their last 19 games against the 49ers, seeing a lot of over money as well, 74% of the tickets on the over. And the Niners come in arguably the hottest team in the league. They've won 10 straight. They're getting healthy. They're asking a rookie quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant, just to kind of manage the game for them with those weapons on offense, with Samuel and Ayuk and Kittle and that running game, and the best defense in football as far as points allowed, playing against a Seattle team with Geno Smith, who I don't think anybody thought would be playing in the postseason.
Yeah, and they really backdoored their way into the postseason to get this 7th spot, travel to
Lions.
number 2 seed San Francisco. Packers had the chance to be in this spot, have that 7th seed, lose to the Lions in that Sunday night game to end the season. Talk about San Francisco. They beat the Seahawks twice this year, 27-7 in Week 2, and then a 21-13 win in Week 15.
In
much
that
later in the
first
season.
meeting, though, no offensive touchdown. I think it was a special teams touchdown.
Yeah, and in the first meeting was actually the second game of the season when Trey Lance gets hurt and Jimmy Garoppolo has to come in, and so now it's Purdy in the next time they beat him. Kittle had 2 touchdowns in the game, and really Kittle's had a resurgence since Purdy's been in at quarterback. We'll see Deebo Samuel's health. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell from a running back standpoint to go along with McCaffrey. And you talked about the vast majority of the tickets are on San Francisco in this game, but the game did open 10.5 with the Niners being a 10.5 point favorite, and it's down to 9.5. So despite the ticket count being on the Niners, some of the sharp money and some of the big money bets have been in Seattle in this spot.
I still don't think it closes below double digits, but we'll have to wait and see. I know it's tough any time to beat a team, the same team in your division, 3 times in the same season. I think the big piece, though, right now is that as good as San Francisco is, and they're the odds-on favorite right now in the NFC, is that you still have a rookie quarterback. And no matter what happened during the regular season, now you know if you happen to hit that speed bump, stub your toe, a loss here and you go home. So there's an added amount of pressure, I think, on a young quarterback with Brock Purdy.
And we're seeing a lot of money on them to win the championship.
Right.
We're taking some big bets on the Niners to win the big game, kind of leapfrogging them against over the number 1 seed, the Eagles, to be that kind of NFC favorite and expected to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Okay, so that's the first game on Saturday. The late game on Saturday is Jags and Chargers. These 2 teams played earlier in the season. All these games are at least rematches, or the teams have played already twice, which is kind of unusual to have no kind of first-time matchups in this wild card round. The numbers started to gone up a little bit on the Chargers against the Jags. Jags come in on a 5-game winning streak. Chargers are 5-0 against the number. Their last 5 road games in Jacksonville. They're 9-1 against the spread. Their last 10 games when playing Jacksonville, with that 1 loss coming this year. And you look at the Jags, and what a surprise. I mean, no one expected them to be here right now. Trevor Lawrence has played so well down the stretch. They've been able to run the ball. Really good young wide receiver. Zay Jones used to play for the Raiders, has done really well. And you have to love the job that this whole coaching staff did there to really kind of bring the Jags up to a playoff team.
Yeah, they won 5 straight. They won a couple of these games in just dramatic fashion with some interception returns against the Cowboys, a Week 18, a fumble return to win the game. They're definitely the hotter team than the Chargers. The Chargers come in here as a 2-point road favorite, being the 5 seed.
And that number has gone up, though. I mean, it was pick, and it slowly started to tick up.
Jacksonville won this game in Week 3, 38-10. Really dominated the Chargers. The Chargers, I think, had two turnovers in that game to the Jaguars, none. The Jags out first downed them 25-16. Out time of possession them 38-25. So, I mean, there's a lot going forward. Jacksonville to have a lot of success and confidence coming into this game. They did have a 100-yard rusher in that game. It was James Robinson, who's no longer with the team. So we'll see if ETN can have the success on the ground game. And really surprising for the Chargers, are the favorite here, but they went into last week's game with really nothing to play for, with the Ravens kind of sitting their guys. And they went and got banged up again at Denver. And Mike Williams is a little bit banged up. He might be expected to play. They've got Bosa banged up. But this is a team that's been injured kind of all year long, between Keenan Allen being hurt, Williams being hurt, Eckler being hurt, Bosa being hurt. So, again, they're probably going to come into this game with a little bit of banged up again. And we'll see who ends up being a difference maker. Keenan Allen was a guy that didn't play in the first matchup, the first time they played the Jags. And I do think that Jags secondary is exploitable. And Keenan Allen, with the combination of Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield, could be a stumbling block for the Jags.
Really didn't touch on ticket counts in this game, but kind of divided a little bit. You do see almost 55% of the tickets are on the Jags. 61% of the tickets 55% of the tickets are on the Chargers. 61% of the tickets are on the over. I think when you look at all these games, you can make a case that with some of the quarterback question marks, you could see some games go under. This is a game that I think you're going to see a lot of scoring in. As you mentioned, the secondary for the Jags is exploitable. And I think you look at the Chargers, they were kind of that vogue team going into the season that we saw a lot more money on to win the Super Bowl, to win their division, and to win the conference. And they didn't play that well. They had a very favorable schedule down the stretch, which helped them get into the postseason. But I'm a little surprised. I actually thought you could see the Chargers actually come into this game an underdog, but early money has been on the Chargers.
Yeah, when you talk about them being an early team early in the year that a lot of people liked, it was because of all the moves they made. They have a lot of offensive weapons. They got some big names on the defensive side of the football. For me, it comes down to coaching here. Peterson has done an exceptional job with this Jaguar team with not a lot of names and that you really know. Lawrence has really taken a huge step this season from last season. And this, the game's a pick 'em for a reason.
Right.
This game's going to go
two
one,
now, but
one way or another. A big turnover or a big mistake could cost the team the game here.
So those are the two games on Saturday. We're going to jump into the Sunday games now. The early game, Dolphins and Bills. Unfortunately, no Tua in this game. Looks like no Bridgewater either. Skylar Thompson will be the starting quarterback for the Dolphins. The Bills come into this game on a 7-game winning streak. Miami at Buffalo has gone over 7 of the last 8 games. Miami has also gone over 6 of their last 7 road games. 82% of the tickets, though, are on the Bills. Almost 80% of the tickets are on the over. So you guys really are favoring the Bills and over in this game. And we know these two teams played late in the season on that late Saturday game in the snow in Buffalo, a game that we thought Miami might actually steal. That game was with Tua. No Tua here, third-string quarterback. We've seen this number change dramatically because of the quarterback change.
Yeah, we're almost up to 2 touchdowns. Buffalo is a 13-point favorite, and that all has to do with the quarterback situation. Skylar Thompson going to most likely be the starters for the Dolphins here. Dolphins do have the offensive weapons. Really slumped here late in the season. Struggled to play very good defense on a really bad road stretch.
They were better at home, but not on the road defensively.
End up winning an 11-6 ugly game in Week 18 against the Jets. Again, Skylar Thompson unable to move the football down the football field, and now all this on top of the Dolphins of having to travel to Buffalo with the emotion of DeMar Hamlin. And we saw what happened last week with Hines with the 2 touchdown returns. The Buffalo Bills didn't have to do it on offense. They kind of did it with the special teams to defeat New England, who was, a playoff hopeful and looking to win that game to get in the playoffs. And now Hamlin's out of the hospital, back in Buffalo. I don't know that we'll see his appearance at the stadium this week, but if they play a home game next week,
the emotion,
the likelihood that he might be able to get out to the stadium and the emotion that has, let alone what him being out, the emotion for the teammates and wanting to go play a season for him. And I think that's why you see this number where it's at with the Bills being almost a 2-touchdown favorite.
Yeah, I think without Tua, it just really kind of changed that game dramatically. The middle game on Sunday now is Giants and Vikings. These two teams played late in the season as well, where the Giants had a chance to win that game. Vikings had a big late field goal to win it. 60% of the tickets are on the Vikings. 55% of the tickets are on the over. But you think about the Giants, Jay. Giants went 7-1 against the number on the road this year in their 8 road games. Giants are also 6-1 against the spread their last 7 games. Minnesota has gone over at home 7 of their last 8 games. So you can see some scoring here too, but the Giants are one of these teams that we didn't expect to be here. New coach, a lot of question marks on defense. Were they going to move forward with Daniel Jones? Barkley was in his contract year. They're one of the biggest surprises in football right now, and they're playing against the Minnesota team, I think, that we've agreed upon, especially late in the season, wasn't as good as what their record showed. I mean, they should have lost that game to the Colts. They found a way to fall out of the number 2 seed in the NFC. They're number 3 right now. But I think the Giants are going to get a lot of love here, plus the points in this game.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, you talked about the struggles of Minnesota down the stretch here, and essentially every one of the games that they play is a one-score game, and they just found themselves on the winning side of a lot of these one-score games. But the loss at Detroit late in the season, the embarrassment at Green Bay, where really Justin Jefferson really got shut down by the Packers, and then they're able to steal a Week 18 game against a Bears team that was, looking to lose to try and secure a number 1 draft pick. So Minnesota hasn't done a whole lot to get your backing or earn your backing. But again, they're at home, and we do know Kirk Cousins, he's got Jefferson, he's got Thielen, they've got Cook, they've got a lot of offensive weapons that the Giants, from their offensive side of the football, are they going to be able to match that? But these two teams aren't intimidated by each other. You talked about it, the Vikings were able to win on a 61-yard field goal just 2 weeks ago in a 27-24 victory. A game that they had to score 17 points in the fourth quarter to get that win. So, again, I think much like the Chargers and Jaguars, this is going to come down to a missed kick, a turnover, something close. I expect this to be a close game throughout the game.
I think it's the familiarity that all these teams have with one another that we're still going to touch on another game where the teams, it's their third time playing, like the 49ers and Seahawks, but it's strange to see so many rematches where they were all games that meant something during the season, so both teams got to kind of see each other at their best.
One of the things that I look for, again, Minnesota from a defensive secondary standpoint, I think they're second worst in the league to only the Titans from a pass defense standpoint. Right. Something that the Giants don't really have the ability to exploit. But look for Hodges and Richie James, even Daniel Bellinger, the young tight end. Those are the guys that are going to have to find a big game here. But for me, if you're looking at props, which again, we're going to have the STN Sports app loaded up with the props, I think that Daniel Jones is going to look to run a lot in this game. It seemed like the last 2 weeks they've been doing a lot more designed runs for him, faking balls to Barkley and having him roll out a little bit more. I think that we may see Daniel Jones running the football a little bit more here. And again, time of possession is going to be important to the Giants to keep that Viking offense off the field.
So now we've touched on 4 of the games. So now the next game we're going to touch on is Ravens-Bengals, which is the late game. What do you say about the Ravens?
You're setting me up. It's like you're putting the golf ball on the tee and you're teeing it up real high because you know that I want to whack it as hard as I can. But the Ravens have been one of the more frustrating teams for me, even going back to before when Lamar Jackson was their quarterback, whether it's Huntley or Anthony Brown or Lamar Jackson. This offense has been stagnant. They can't get the ball to the wide receiver. They haven't been able to get the ball to the tight end, Andrews. They've been trying to do it through a running game, and they just don't have anything to offer from an offensive standpoint. The defense has been incredible, but if you go look through their last 5-6 games, you're going to see that their high score in those games was like 17 points, and a lot of times they don't even get to 2 touchdowns. And I just think that they're in a bad spot here against a Bengals team that we know can absolutely put up points in a hurry. We've seen this line go from 6.5 all the way to 8.5, with the likelihood that Lamar Jackson still isn't practicing.
Right.
Huntley's still banged up. We may see Anthony Brown again, who the Bengals were an 11-point favorite just last week, got up really, really early and then kind of got stagnant. And we saw the Ravens kind of try and come back into that game. But to me, we talk about the Seahawks backdooring their way into the playoffs. This Raven team had a good first half of the season, or a steady first half of the season, but this back half of the season, they've played absolutely nobody. They beat some bad teams in the Broncos and the Steelers and those type of teams, and I really just think this is a spot where they just don't have the tools in the shed on the offensive side of the football, and we need to look as to what they're going to do with signing Lamar Jackson, and talk about the Niners being the team that people are betting in the NFC. The Bengals are the sexy team, getting a lot of money on the AFC side. And obviously, from a Chiefs and a Bills standpoint, the Bengals are the third choice in the AFC, but a lot of money coming in on the Bengals to be representing the AFC in the Super Bowl and then winning that game
I think the one thing with the Bengals, though, if everything were to play out, they would have to go through both Buffalo and Kansas City, which isn't an easy task for any team. You look at Cincinnati, as you said, 8 straight wins, 6-1 at home. And we talked about the large ticket discrepancy with the Seahawks and 49ers. There's no game that's larger than the Ravens and Bengals, with 83% of the tickets on the Bengals, 67% of the tickets on the over. And you look at the Baltimore offense, as Jay mentioned, 5 of their last 6 games under, which I think just screams that how the struggling offense has been. You know, I think 1 touchdown over the last 6 or 7 weeks to a wide receiver. They're on a 2-game losing streak. It's not just the quarterback position, but it's Gus Edwards that's banged up, Ronnie Staley that's banged up. They've got a number of guys coming in this game banged up, and there's a big question, though, for them going into the offseason with Lamar Jackson. They gave Roquan Smith that big deal this year, so it looks like best case for Lamar would be they can't get a deal done. They franchise him. Does he want to play on the franchise tag for the next few years or not?
Yeah, and you talk about the ticket counts, 83% of the tickets being on the Bengals. And one of the reasons for that is, being in that 7-8 point favorite, this is the teaser game of the week.
Right.
I mean, I think every teaser that we're going to see come across the counter is going to have the Bengals teased down to a 1 point favorite, 1.5 point favorite underneath that field goal, and then finding the other teasers throughout the week that you may like. So, whether it's Moneyline Bengals or Teasers Bengals, that's why you're seeing so many tickets on the Bengals this week.
So now the Monday night football playoff wild card game, America's team against the GOAT. I mean, they played this out kind of perfectly, so you'd see this matchup come in. Tampa Bay and Dallas, under 6 of the last 7 times they've played each other, 54% of the tickets are on the Cowboys in this one. And you look at only 53% of the tickets are on the over. These two teams played week 1 this year. Leonard Fournette had his best game of the season. It was the game that Dak got injured. There wasn't a lot of scoring in that game. And I think if you look for a game that's going to be really close to the vest, I think this is the game. We've seen this number come down a little bit. Early action has clearly been on Tampa so far. And it's both teams have solid, good defenses. We'll see how this one plays out. But I love that it's the Monday night game.
You made me talk about my Ravens, who I've been really frustrated with, and I think you kind of know in watching bookends through the year that the Tampa Bay Bucs have been a very frustrating team to watch from this standpoint. Again, really no offense. Tom Brady was able to find kind of Mike Evans here a little bit late in the season to steal some wins, but a lot of their wins to win the AFC South wasn't games that they went and actually won. It seemed like it was games that the Cardinals blew to them or the Saints blew to them. They did have the week 1 win.
You're not a big GOAT fan this year.
No, it's you want to see good football. I don't think the Tampa Bay Bucs have played good football. They've done enough to win the NFC South, but I don't know how much they're really a threat to whether it's the Eagles or the Niners to win the NFC. The big thing for them is that the Cowboys have not been playing good football either. We've seen them struggle against the Texans. We've seen them get blown out by a Washington team with a third string quarterback. We've seen them lose to the Jaguars. They just don't have something going right on offense. They have the tools necessary to have a good offense with Pollard and Zeke. And if Dak can have a good football game, he does have Schultz and Lamb on the back end. They acquired T.Y. Hilton. And maybe I can return the favor. I'll tee you up. You want me to tee you up with the Dak Prescott interception
That's
stats?
part of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay, we'll wait
we can't really look at that. But you're right. I think when you look at the Cowboys, they've got all the ingredients to win the Super Bowl, to be playing in mid-February. They can run the ball, as you mentioned, with Pollard and Zeke. They've got a really good defense led by Parsons. They've got wide receivers in CeeDee Lamb and T.Y. Hilton now and Schultz. They've got everything there to win it. And it'll be interesting if they happen to win this game and have to play the Eagles. It'll be the third time that these two teams will have met. The interesting part about that is the first game that the Eagles won, it was against Cooper Rush. The second game that the Cowboys won, it was against Gardner Minshew. So you haven't seen Dak against Jalen Hurts yet in a game. It'll be interesting to see if it plays out that way.
Yeah, we'll just see if they're able to just turn it on. I mean, I don't know what this game comes down to. I think it's a defensive game. We talked about that the first time these teams played. It was 19-3. I can see this being a let's not make a mistake. Right. Let's run the ball and see play a field position type game. This won't surprise me if this is one of the under games. And obviously, from a standpoint of wild card weekend, we're playing Monday Night Football on wild card weekend, something that we haven't done before. Probably going to be one of the major monster handles of the week on this game, just because it's of where it's at on Monday night.
I think from our side to have primetime games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is phenomenal. So it should be fun. Before we get into the good and the bad and the ugly, though, when we talked about the wild card teams, we touched a little bit about the two teams that have the bye, the Chiefs and Eagles. Check out the app or come in any of our racing sports books. We have the exact matchup that you can look at right now and wager on of who the two teams that are going to be playing that second week in February are, which is kind of a cool prop.
Yeah.
There's 49 matchups.
Instead of having to go in and individually pick an NFC conference winner and an AFC conference winner, you can actually go in and pick them both at the same time, essentially parlaying them together to get your payout there. With make a lot of fun, a lot of interest as we're going to see the next 3 weeks.
Definitely kind of a cool thing. So now I can hear John, he's queuing it up in the back right now. It's wild card weekend. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're really focusing on pro football, though. We're going to stay with that theme. The good for me, I know we touched on them, is the Jags. I mean, this is a team that the last 2 years, they had the number one pick in the overall draft. They went Lawrence, they went Walker, they went offense, defense. It didn't look like early this year that they were going to be the same old Jags. They go on a 5-game winning streak. The Titans really struggle. The Colts weren't as good as we thought, and we know about the Texans. So I think Doug Peterson has done a great job there. They spent more money than any team in football in free agency, which has really helped that team somewhat. But 5-game winning streak, made it to the postseason, hosting a playoff game. Hats off to Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jags. They're my good.
Yeah, my good, not looking at a playoff team, but really congratulations to Dan Campbell and to the Detroit Lions on the way they finished the season and the way they fought, in particular, to go into Week 18, traveling to Green Bay. You know that your playoff hopes are dead earlier in the day as the Seahawks win, and still go in there and fight and knock the Green Bay Packers out of the playoffs. And I think everybody knows that we're Bear fans,
right.
And when you're a Bear fan, you grow up to hate the green and gold. And so it was good to see them knock it out. Right. But really, as much as it's a team in the division, it's just a great way to see the Detroit Lions finally become relevant. They've got some picks here at the top of the draft. They've got some interesting players. We'll see where Detroit ends up, but I don't think that we'll be looking at the Detroit Lions as the basement team when we talk about next year's divisional rankings.
Well, I think a lot's going to be contingent in the NFC North is what ultimately does happen with Aaron Rodgers. Is he the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers? Does he retire? Is he the quarterback of another team? So, I mean, he's locked into such a big salary that it really has kind of handcuffed the Packers a little bit as what they can do. So, let's jump into the bad now. And you queued me up well for Dak Prescott. Here's kind of an interesting tidbit about the Cowboys Super Bowl odds. Dak Prescott led the NFL with 15 interceptions. No quarterback has led the NFL in interceptions and won the Super Bowl since Matt Stafford did it last year with the Rams. Also, Dak has thrown interceptions in 7 straight games. So he's got the big contract. I know he had the injury this year, but you really look at the way they can run the ball, the way they play defense, their receivers. He's the guy right now that I think has to elevate his game if Dallas is going to be playing that second week in February.
Nothing would surprise me in the NFC. Obviously, we talk about the Eagles and Niners, but I won't be surprised if we see some upsets on the NFC side of things. And obviously, I think, on the AFC side, you could talk about the Chiefs, Bengals, and Bills, and then we've got a kind of a bunch of injuries that exist on some of the other teams, and then the Jags and the Chargers. So I really think it's a 3-horse race, and we're probably 6 horses in the NFC that I really can see winning things. And obviously, we talked about, from our standpoint, the Niners are a team that we have big liability on, looking for somebody to knock that Niner team off. For my bad, I'm going to get out of football for a second and jump back over to the NBA, which we haven't talked a bunch about, but a couple weeks ago, we had the San Antonio Spurs on a really bad run, getting beat, I think, in like 13 straight. They've kind of come out of the funk. They're no longer in the last place in the Western Conference. That belongs to the Houston Rockets, who have lost 7 in a row, are now 10-30, and are the basement of the NBA, really struggling. So I don't know what's going on in the water in Texas that San Antonio and Houston are struggling so much on the hard court. But my bad has been the Houston Rockets of late, really been getting blown out in their games in the NBA.
So in other words, you're saying if you're the Mavs, stick to juice?
Oh, I didn't even think that the Mavs have been playing well. Doncic's obviously on fire.
Stick to juice, though, right? No water, right? All right, so now the ugly. I mean, as we've mentioned, for forever, we're both Bears fans, being from Chicago, and there's a certain team in blue and orange that is now on the clock for the first overall pick, drafted in Kansas City this year, and being Bears fans, it's phenomenal because we have a quarterback we think that we can build a franchise around and should be able to, hopefully, if we trade out of that pick, if it's the Texans or if it's the Colts or any other quarterback-needy team, that we're going to get a haul for. So being Bears fans, we're looking forward to the combine, the offseason, the draft. But we're able to accomplish that because of the ugly, which is the Houston Texans. So no team this year was able to convert 2 4th and 10s or longer in the same game. Well, guess what? On that final drive, the Houston Texans converted 2 4th and 10s or longer, the last being a 4th and 20 to score the touchdown to put them 1 point behind. And we expected that 2-point conversion to win it, to be at somebody's feet, to be 20 yards over his head. And guess what?
Or just outright take a knee.
They converted. So the Texans found a way that was so improbable to blow the number 1 pick. And they did it. So, Lovey, I know you used to be a Bears coach, and thank you. Thank you again for helping the Bears get the number 1 overall pick, because it hadn't happened all year that a team was able to convert multiple 4th and 10s or longer. You did it on the same drive and won 4th and 20 to win it for the Texans, and the Bears are on the clock.
My ugly, I'm gonna go to the NFC West, and we talk about the Niners and where they're sitting, and Seattle finding themselves in the playoffs. But really, for me, it's about what the Rams and Cardinals and the situation that we see both of these teams at right now. Obviously, the Rams are 1 year removed from being our Super Bowl champion, now out of the playoffs, and we're being told that Sean McVay might not return to the team, and all their coaches are looking for other jobs. And so how the mighty have fallen for the Rams to just fall off and sign McVay to this big deal, and then now he may jump out of that deal. And then also in the division, to see the Arizona Cardinals fire Cliff Kingsbury, who again had another 3 years.
He signed a big deal in March, a new deal.
Just signed, and they signed Kyler Murray to a big deal, and then we had the stink about him, studying the playbook and all that stuff. And obviously now with his injury, he's probably going to miss the vast majority of next season. But just the ugliness of watching these two guys take these programs, seemingly secure the future of both the Rams and the Cardinals to be competitive in that division, and now we don't know where either of these two franchises are heading and who's going to coach, and you just wonder what state and how these teams come back. In particular, the Rams, who gave up a lot of draft capital to get Stafford and go get the players that they had there.
Ramsey.
Yeah, and now they have nothing, and so who comes in there and what do they have and how long does it take them to potentially rebuild? And obviously they'll still have an incredible player like Cooper Kupp, but is Stafford even going to be able to come back, and where do they go from a quarterback standpoint?
He says he is going to come back, and I think it goes back to really all sports, is that they mortgage the future to win a championship, and they did. So if you're Ram fans, I mean, I know it's going to be, I think they don't have a number one until 2028. So you have given up a lot. You figure not to maybe be as competitive, but you still have Ramsey and Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp, as you said. You've got some young wideouts and Jefferson. You've got Cam Akers, who really after the suspension came back and played well. You just don't have the draft capital. But anything can happen in this league. I think in Arizona's case, I don't believe they had one game this year that you had Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown, James Conner, and Hopkins play in. And Ertz. So, although Kingsbury, struggled, it looked like last year for that big hot start, they got blown out in the playoff game. But when you've got an offensive nucleus like that, and you don't have all five of those guys on the field, I wasn't 100% sure that he was going to be out. I thought he might get another opportunity, especially since they signed him to that big deal in March. I think he still has 4 or 5 years left at $5.5 million. I was a little surprised they made that move because he was working with not a full deck as far as all his players go at that time.
Yeah, and again, I from our standpoint of handicapping and bookmaking and making lines, you want to see competitive teams. And when teams fall off and end up being on the outliers on being non-competitive and bad teams, that's not good for us from a balance of the NFL and taking bets on it when we have really bad teams. And it just seems like this year we're a lot of bad teams. We had a lot of teams with under 6 wins in an 18 17 game season that just becomes turbulent, and it seems like we're almost in the standpoint of seeing teams already set to fail for next year before the pieces of the puzzle are even decided.
I know we had read something and we had talked about it, guys. I know this is more the postseason, and we're going to be talking about the playoffs for the next month, going into the Super Bowl and all the props and all the cool stuff we have. But it's going to be an interesting offseason because there's so many teams that really need a quarterback, 19 or 20 teams, and how is that deck going to be reshuffled? Is Brady ultimately still in Tampa? Does he retire? Is he a Raider? What happens with Aaron Rodgers? How many teams are going to be, what happens with Jimmy G? How many teams are Carr? What happens with Derek Carr? How many teams are going to be in that kind of quarterback shuffle? How many teams are going to want to trade up if it's for one of the top young quarterbacks coming out this year? It's going to really be an interesting offseason.
I know you're going to want to do an entire draft special.
I am.
So we'll get that teed up as we get closer to April's draft. But no, I mean, again, look forward to the playoffs. We didn't talk a whole lot about the NBA and the NHL, which there's, as we turn the calendar to now 2023, some of those playoff races start to heat up. Our Knights are right there tied in first place in the West with the Dallas Stars, but there's a ton going on with basketball, college basketball. As we get closer to March, you're seeing a lot of those races tighten up as we gotten into conference play. So a ton of stuff on the app between hockey, basketball, and college basketball, and so a ton of stuff to look forward each day to getting on the app and playing all the props that we have available.
And don't forget, if you don't have the app, get signed up because you've got all these primetime games coming up for the postseason. As Jay mentioned, we've got next year's college football championship up, the Exacta, the two teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl. We've got, you can bet that as well. There's 49 different combinations.
There's actually already some big game props up. If you want to look at, what's going to happen that
nice teaser.
The 12th of February, we've actually got, will there be a safety? Will there be overtime? Will there be a defensive touchdown? So if you want to start to look at some of the big game props, those are out there. And obviously, one of the great reasons to get the app right now is to prepare yourself for the big game, to be able to look through that laundry list of props that we're going to have, rather than going through the 30 pages that we'll have in the packet here. Be able to look at the props and actually look at the exact price that they're at versus a price that's pre-printed on the paper.
And after the big game, you start conference tournaments in basketball. We're not that far away from the big dance, so really a good time to get signed up for STN Sports. So next week, as we jump back into the playoff segment, we'll be talking about the Chiefs and Eagles, who had the bye. Who are they playing? Were there any upsets this week? So great time to have the app. Check everything out. And we look forward to, talking throughout the playoffs with you guys, trying to give you some interesting, tidbits about the playoffs and some of these teams and some cool stats. So he's Jason, Chuck. We're over here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook, and we'll see you guys next week on the Sports Betting Podcast